Welcome back to the D5 Football YouTube channel. This week we're speaking to Tom, who is a Chesterfield fan of SpireitesWrite podcast. How you doing, mate?
Not too bad, thanks, mate. Yeah, cheers for having me on. It's always nice to speak to fellow football fans. So, yeah, it's cracking.
So in this sort of another fan interview, we're going to speak about James Rowe since he joined Chesterfield in November and converted Chesterfield into Gloucester City's feeder team, if you like. Well, we're going to speak about, obviously, the signings, but we're going to speak about his time at the club, James Rowe's time at the club, and before that as well, and the differences. We've got some stats. You guys seem to really like the stats from the Stockport episode. It's done quite well. So we've got some more graphs and stuff like that, which I think you're going to enjoy. Again, it's not necessarily really. We're going to obviously speak and say you as well, whatever. So if you listen to this on you've got it in your pocket, or you're listening just audio, it's not massive. Although, like I said, looking at the stats looking at the graphs, would help out. Before we get started, do you want to give we're going to give a shout out at the end, obviously reminding people. Do you just want to give a quick shout out to what you do with your podcast and sort of how you got into it?
Absolutely, yeah. So for anyone who's not heard of us, we're the SpireitesWrite podcast. We started doing podcasts probably about a year ago now. We basically just spotted a bit of a gap in the market from a Chesterfield point of view. It didn't seem like there were many people doing that sort of thing for Chesterfield, and we thought, you know what? We're three mates. We love talking about football and Chesterfield, so why not? Why not do it? And it's been fairly successful since then. I think we probably get about 50 views or something like that every week, which we're happy with from a Chesterfield point of view. But we don't really do it for the views. We more do it because we just enjoy talking about our club at the end of the day. And we're trying to build up a little following on social media. So if you're a Chesterfield fan that hasn't heard of us and you're watching this, then go and check us out.
Yeah. I think there might be, well, at least if it does what the Stockport podcast did, in terms of it pushes it out to Chesterfield fans, and stuff like that. If perhaps haven't heard of the podcast, then that might be quite good. So in this, we're going to have some, let's say we've got the graphs on some stats. Now we were speaking beforehand about this. They didn't really, you find it quite interesting was looking at the graphs obviously we sent you beforehand, that these weren't really available or weren't around that much in the National League because there wasn't really anyone else doing it. Sort of similar to what you do with the podcast. There weren't really else doing it. That's the same with us, really. So I've got just a quick sort of, before we go in depth, stuff like tackles and passes and chances created and shots and, stats like that that are going to, obviously, I do like to sort of think we're going to make it more factual rather than just someone saying their opinion. I do like to think, okay, that's some kind of stats to back it up. So what we're going to do is we're going to put the stats up on the screen and as when we're talking about them, and Tom could sort of say, well, this is what I think, and here's the stats that sort of back it up if you like. That's sort of quite a basic sort of thing. So we've got a few of them, like I said, and also we've got other episodes like this with the fans. If you want to go and watch them afterwards, then you can do. So the first one we've got is challenges won and tackles. So tackles along the bottom and challenges won up the side. So what do you make of those two?
Yeah, I'll start off with challenges won per 90. And Tom Denton being at the top of that is very unsurprising. He's quite literally a massive player for us. He's about 6'5", 6'6". He's a target man. And probably for about 2 or 3 years now, since we dropped into non-league and signed him, he's been one of our most important players. He's the kind of player who he gets quite a lot of flack from some sects of the Chesterfield fan base for not being mobile, like a mobile, nippy player, but he's very, very important. He causes a handful to every defence that he comes up against in the National League. He wins headers. He's actually surprisingly good with the ball to his feet as well. So I think from the challenges won per 90 point of view, the fact that he's top, that's not surprising because especially earlier in the season, we were playing a lot of long ball football, especially long diagonals, and he was always there to win it. To his credit, he very rarely loses out on an aerial challenge, so I think that's why you've seen him so high up there at the top. Second in that is Hayden Hollis, and that is probably testament to his more recent form actually, because previously we were shipping goals for fun, probably in the first 8 games or so of the season, under John Pemberton, who obviously took the reins in the summer. And then it didn't start very well for him. We were conceding a lot of goals. And I think it was largely down to the style of play that we were playing. It was quite a defensive style of play. And we were inviting teams onto us almost. And I think when you're getting teams attacking you for 90 minutes of a football match, it's only a matter of time until the gates have breached and they score at the end of the day. But I think the key thing is, since James Rowe came in, he's implemented a high pressing style of play. And now the lines of engagement on the pitch are probably about 60 or 70 yards further up. And that it causes an absolutely massive difference. And I think the biggest difference that it causes is that the defence has much less to do. But I think the fact that Hayden Hollis is second shows you how pivotal he is to Chesterfield's defence, because he just doesn't let anything past him. He's a fantastic centre half. He's a classic, no nonsense. He'll win tackles, he'll win headers, and I think that's why you've seen him there. Obviously, Will Evans next to him, Chesterfield's captain, another centre half, quite prolific at this level. Obviously, he got the playoffs of Aldershot Town a few years back. He's also a very big player for us, especially since Rowe came in and moved him out to the right-hand side of a back three. That's done him absolute wonders. And he's obviously winning a lot of tackles and challenges as well. I think the last two in the challenges won are quite interesting. Ikwasi Asante is a striker. You'll probably heard of him. We signed him off of Gloucester City along with half their team, to be fair. And I think the fact that you've seen challenges won him so high up, that's because he is probably the most important player for us in terms of the pressing game that we're playing. You know, he's running at players high up the pitch. He's getting into little battles with them and stuff like that. And obviously he's coming out on top in a lot of cases. So that just highlights the effects of the high press. And then Curtis Weston, he's our midfield general, really. He just doesn't stop running. He runs for 90 minutes. I think he's like 30 years old as well, so he's got some cracking legs in him for his age. And he's a really combative central midfielder, so that's why you're seeing him up there as well.
Something I should have mentioned probably before I put these up, there's a minimum 200, you can see it at the top left, but you might not have noticed it, everyone. There's a minimum of 250 minutes played. So if you're sort of like, where's Gavin Gunning? We need at least 250 minutes of data on him. So, just so we don't have one guy who's played 2 minutes and made a tackle and then he's massively through the roof or something like that, so I think it's understandable. And also the bubbles, if you can see some dots are big than others, that's just sort of saying how many games they've played, or minutes played, sorry. So you can see some of the smaller ones and you see some of the big ones. That's all that is. I probably should have said that before I ran to everyone, but hopefully you can understand that now. What do you make? Is there anything else you want to say about that one, obviously, with the tackles as well?
Obviously I didn't really cover the tackles, did I? So the interesting thing that I saw was that Milan Butterfield and Liam Mandeville are in the top 5 for tackles, 1 per 90. Well, tackle successful, rather. I guess you could argue that tackle successful means, out of how many tackles they've tried, how many have come off. So if they've only tried one in a game and it's come off, then they're going to have the highest stat, aren't they? But Milan Butterfield and Liam Mandeville, they're two players that haven't massively featured in the first team this season. Butterfield's been on loan in the National League North, so he's not really played much for Chesterfield. Liam Mandeville's more of a creative attacking midfield player. So it's a bit strange that he's in this list. But like I said, that's probably because maybe he tries 2 tackles a game or 3 tackles a game and he manages to succeed on 2 out of 3. So it's probably more down to the lack of quantity of challenges. So that's a weird one. But I think Curtis Weston at the top and Hayden Hollis being in the top 5 as well. I mean, based on what I said a minute ago, that sounds about par for the course.
I think it's also a point, both of their bubbles are quite small. So when we have put a sort of minutes cap on them, if they're one of the smaller, less minutes played, then that allows them to, be a bit further up or, be further down, not exactly not have numbers that are exactly accurate, if you like, compared to some of the other guys that, with bigger bubbles, whatever. Moving on to the second one, we've got defensive challenges won and ball recoveries in opponent's half. This was another one, obviously. Obviously, I asked which ones do you think would be interesting to have a look at, and this was another one you said. So again, with this, same obviously with minutes played and the bubble stuff like that. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, Tyler Denton, he's another player that's not really featured much for us, and he's actually left the club now. He's playing for Kings Lynn Town now. Mandeville, Maguire, and Weston are the main 3 from that one who have been playing many minutes for us this season. Mandeville's been featuring off the bench mainly, like I said. But Maguire's an interesting one because he's a centre half. So the fact that he's winning the ball back a lot in the opposition half shows you probably more our style of play, but also a little bit his style of play. He's a little bit like his older brother Harry, who I'm sure you've all heard of. Obviously plays for Man United in England. In that he likes to win the ball, and then he likes to drive up the pitch with it, and then play it off to the midfielders or whatever. So I think he's probably quite an attacking centre half in some ways, which is quite interesting. But also under James Rowe's style of play, we are trying to challenge the opposition quite high up the pitch, and I think that the fact that he features there definitely highlights that. And Curtis Weston, again, it just shows you how pivotal he is to our current style. He battles with players in their own half. He doesn't give them a minute's rest, and quite often he wins the ball back in their half, and it's absolutely essential to the way that we play. And moving on to defensive challenges, 1 per 90. The fact that Hollis, Evans and Maguire are all up there. I mean, they're our free centre halves, so you'd expect them to be top anyway. But obviously Hollis up there at probably like 8. And then you compare it to the likes of Weston and Sharma, who were probably down at like 4.5, 5. It just shows you how important Hollis is. He really just has not put a foot wrong in the last few weeks since he came back into the side. And him, Evans and Maguire, they've been fantastic recently. And I think the fact that we've barely conceded any goals in the league demonstrates that.
Yeah. Moving on to the next one. This was about passes. So passes and key passes. So again, another one. We'll be obviously like quite a lot on 0 and stuff. I just want to also say, with the stats or whatever, sort of definitions, if you like, of what thing, what each one is. You might have a sort of a different definition of what sort of key passes, if you like. It's something to be obviously aware of. But the important thing is it's all relative. So, it's one of them where if anyone's obviously watching it, might be saying, well, I saw this pass or whatever, or whatever. It's more of a case of like, it's relative to show, sort of what type of thing. It's not so much about the numbers, if you like, and it's also, I say, if one's just a little bit better than the other one, it doesn't mean that, it's all about the same ballpark, really, I think. So, if you've got a clump of, some of the stats we do with plays for the whole league, you have like a group of players who are all quite similar on one thing. And, generally, sort of general thing is, at least I think, is those guys are basically the same, but, just they just got a bit lucky and stuff. That's what I would say. So I'm just wondering about why, the guys at the bottom, obviously. But for that one, I had my little sort of rant and tangent there. Not as many players on this one, I don't think. But and I think there's one, I've just realised this actually. I think there's one player on there, Curtis Weston, who I think he's merged into another. I've only just realised this. I think he's merged into another player. I think there's a player who we should have had on there who wasn't on there. So I'll, if I can find who that is, I'll put that in the comments in below so you can go and have a look. But for this one then, obviously missing the player who should have been on there. What do you think of that one?
Give me 2 seconds. I'm just trying to get it up.
It's fine.
Passes and key passes.
Yeah.
So key passes accurate per 90. I think the fact that Liam Mandeville and Jordan Cropper are the top 2 isn't really surprising. Especially earlier in the season, Jordan Cropper was a huge player for us. He was a right back who we had on loan from Burnley. And you could quite clearly tell that he was too good for the National League, to be honest. He was quintessential attacking wing back, I would say. He could get up and down the pitch quickly. He could take players on. He could put crosses into the box. And he was very, very important for us early in the season. He's actually since returned to Burnley because James Rowe signed James Carline from Gloucester, who he can play in a number of positions, but one of those positions he can play is in that right wing back position. And he was featuring under James Rowe. So obviously, Cropper not getting game time at Chesterfield has gone back to Burnley. But him early in the season, he was a very important player too. And I think the fact that he's still second on this, despite the fact that he's not been here for a few weeks, says it all really. Mandeville, it's interesting that he's top, given that, like I said, he's not always featured in the first team and he's been coming off the bench quite a lot. But I think it really does demonstrate his game. He's very much a creative attacking midfielder. He's inconsistent. That's the only issue with Mandeville. He's definitely got quality. He was playing in I think League One for Doncaster Rovers a few years back, and even their coaching staff said that he's got the potential to be a fantastic player. He just needs to be more consistent. And ever since he's come in, that's the only thing that he's struggled with is the consistency. I mean, a couple of weeks ago against Wrexham, he pulled off an absolutely fantastic pass that just split the defence wide open for Kwasi Asante to slot in the winner in like the 89th minute. So it just shows you the impact that it can have in games. But if he did it on a consistent basis, I think he could play in the Football League. It's just the inconsistency side. But it's interesting that he's still top on this, given that he is so inconsistent a lot of the time. So maybe I'm being a bit too harsh on him, who knows? But yeah, looking at them, sort of like the main cluster of the players on this one. Obviously, you've got Joel Taylor, Tom Denton, Asante, Curtis Weston, all around the same point for key passes accurate. Sounds about right, to be honest. The way that we're playing now, it is very much a passing style of play when we're in possession. So there's not really one focal point in terms of the attacks, if you know what I mean. Obviously, Denton was definitely that for us earlier in the season, so that's probably why he's in that sort of position. But to be fair, I'm surprised it's not higher. But I guess the point I'm trying to make is you'd expect that stat to be spread throughout the team because of the way we're playing now. We're trying to pass it around quickly, stretch defences, and you'd expect the key passes to be spread out throughout every single player, kind of thing. And in terms of accurate passes per 90, Jack McCourt being top, that does not surprise me. He's been a fantastic player since he came in for us. He's very much I guess I'd probably say a box-to-box midfielder. He gets on the ball a lot. He keeps things ticking over. Is your main engine room, I guess, in the midfield. So it doesn't surprise me that he's the most accurate passer for us. Mandeville featuring highly on that one as well. But Lawrence Maguire featuring, that's an interesting one. I guess that sort of goes back to what I said earlier on about, he's a centre-half, but he's probably got a bit more of an attacking mindset than a typical centre-half would. And he likes to get on the ball and pass it around. And clearly he's doing that quite effectively, given that he's so high up on the accuracy ratings. For Bowden, Butterfield, Sharman, Whittle, Buchanan, and Denton to all be on 0 on key passes accurate, that is quite surprising. Although, to be fair, actually, other than Buchanan, most of those are barely featured. I mean, Alex Whittle, he only came in probably 2 weeks ago, and as all Chesterfield fans will know, we've just not had games recently because we've had. I think this now is our third COVID-enforced break in the space of about 2 months, and then we've had games called off due to waterlogged pitches and all sorts. Honestly, it's been so disruptive. So Whittle's not really had much of a chance to play since he came in, just because we haven't been playing games. But yeah, Bowden Butterfield, they're both rumoured to be players who don't feature in James Rowe's plans. So we'll probably be seeing them move on in the near future. So I guess they've not really played enough to, attempt accurate passes. Jamie Sharman, he's a young lad, a young centre-half. He's recently been loaned out to the National League North, and he's probably someone who will feature for us more in the future. But for now, he's a young lad, and he's a centre-half anyway, so you probably wouldn't expect key passes from him. And Buchanan, he's one that I probably expect to get a few more key passes under his belt. He's very what's the right way to put it? He's been around the ground. I think he's about 33 years old, and he played for Northampton Town in the Football League for quite a long time. He's an experienced professional, and he's a left wing back who likes to get up and down the pitch. So when he was playing for us, because we've signed about 2 or 3 left backs recently, but when he was playing for us early in the season, I would have expected him to get at least a few accurate key passes off, but clearly not. But I guess that kind of sums up that sort of discrepancy and why you're seeing so many players on 0.
Yeah, I guess also to point plays on 0, sort of what I said before, is I guess also it's the threshold there, the guys who compile the stats, the company, of what their sort of threshold is, for what it is. Other sites will have their own sort of threshold. So, what I mean? I guess, like I say, it's more of a relative thing rather than sort of definitive numbers. I guess that's sort of just to point that out as well. And obviously the bubbles as well matter, obviously with the amount of games they've played and stuff like that. So, moving on to the last one, chances created versus shots, obviously both per 90. What do you make of that one?
Give me 2 ticks. Right, so shots per 90. Kwasi Asante very clearly at the top. That doesn't surprise me. I think the one complaint I've had with Asante since he came in is that, yeah, he scored quite a few goals, but he could have had even more. He got a hat-trick against Barnet in our 6-0 win over them fairly recently. And to be honest, he probably could have had about 6 goals on his own. Literally, some of the chances that he squandered that you'd expect him to score. And then he went and pulled out some absolutely brilliant skills and scored some goals that were probably a lot harder than the ones he should have buried. But, I guess that's part and parcel of being a striker, isn't it? You are going to fluff your line sometimes on easy chances, and then you are going to create some fantastic goals in other cases. But, it doesn't surprise me that he's top of the shots chart here. He is a very dangerous player at National League level. And to be honest, I can definitely see him playing in the Football League in the near future. If not with Chesterfield, fingers crossed, with somebody else. Tom Denton also being up there. I mean, that doesn't really surprise me. Like I said, especially early in the season, he was very much a focal point for us. And he's a player who very much gets slandered a lot, to be honest. He's branded as just a target man and nothing else. But I think he's a very dangerous striker, and especially from headers and things like that, from set pieces. He's just a handful for any defence at this level. And I guess the number of shots he's pulled off there says it all. Scott Bowden being up there, I think that says it all about his season, really. He seems to have quite a relatively large number of shots in the games that he's played, but he's also not scored many goals. And I think it almost shows the frustration that he's had at Chesterfield this season, because he's a player with potential at National League level. We signed him off of Gateshead a couple of years back, and he was doing really well for them at that point. I think he'd got like 15 goals when we signed him. And then he got another 5 or 6 for us at, sort of like to the end of that season. But then since then, he's sort of really struggled to, first of all, keep his place in the first team, and second of all, have an impact when he's in there. And it's quite sad, really, because he's a player who's had 2 spells at Chesterfield. I think he's a Sheffield lad, so he's fairly local to us. And he's well liked by Chesterfield fans, but he's just never really had he's not really had the rub of the green, I don't think, at the club. And I think the fact that he's now rumoured to be not in James Rowe's plans for the future, it just shows you it's not really worked out for him this season. And I think that this graph sort of backs that up. He's had a lot of shots in the games that he's played, but he's not scored many goals. I think that says it all, really. Moving on to chances created per 90. Obviously, seeing Liam Mandeville feature highly there again. To say that he's not been playing a lot of games, it says a lot, really, about his impact, I suppose, off the bench especially. He's very much a player who has the potential to create goals. Obviously, I told you a minute ago about that fantastic pass that he played in the Wrexham game. And it's not only that, like every time he's on the pitch, he'll always come out with at least one lovely bit of skill, like a nice run, that sort of thing. It's just a consistency doing that. And to be honest, if he did that every week, he'd be a Football League player easily. Jordan Cropper being there again, as I've mentioned early in the season, important player for us. Jack McCourt, quite highly on the chances created. That doesn't surprise me either. He's like I said, he plays a lot of passes. He keeps things ticking in midfield, and he's got a good eye for a long pass as well. I think it's fair to say. I remember this one pass that he played against Barnet as well, where Joel Taylor, our left back, was making a run down the left channel, and he just looked up and he played this absolutely pinpoint 70-yard long diagonal ball straight onto his chest, and it was just fantastic, to be honest. It was a pass that you wouldn't expect to see at non-league level, to be honest. It was like Paul Scholes-esque, to be fair. But yeah, other than that, nothing surprises me on that graph there.
So we're done with all the graphs now, so you don't have to look at it anymore. If you do want any more graphs, go and follow us on Twitter at DeFi Football. We've got some more stats and graphs and stuff like that. Chesterfield, obviously, but just National League in general. Now we're going to have a quick chat about James Rowe in general. Since he came into the club, the players he's signed, and difference before and after he came in. So just a bit of context, and as an outsider, I think I can say this pretty fairly. The club, over the past few years, had quite a lot of turmoil, lots of problems, relegations and stuff like that. And it looks very much like, I know this was in sort of your Twitter bio, I think, on the podcast account, soon to be National League North, which that looked like it very well could happen. Obviously, It didn't happen. Turning that around now and the turnaround for the club, do you think this is actually sort of like he's the man who could take the club back to the Football League, possibly even back to League One within the next few years?
Yeah, I think so. So a little bit of context for you. Basically, we won League Two back in 2014, and there was a real feel-good factor around the club at the time under Paul Cook, who I'm sure you've probably heard of. He's quite a prominent manager in the Football League these days. And to be honest, that was probably the best football that Chesterfield had seen in decades. I'm not exaggerating when I say that. We had some absolutely fantastic players, the likes of Sam Morsey, Jimmy Ryan, Owen Doyle, Gary Roberts, and it was all feeling really good. Obviously, the next season we got the playoffs in League One, and I think that's probably when the cracks started to form a little bit, because Paul Cook allegedly demanded a larger transfer sort of budget from our then owner Dave Allen, who's a casino magnate from Sheffield, and he refused it. So Paul Cook ended up leaving to go to Portsmouth, and we appointed Dean Saunders off the back of a good after dinner speech that he'd given at the club, which just seemed a bit farcical, to be honest. Like, apparently he was a good talker, so he gave him the job, and we ended up getting, I think, probably like one or two wins in 8 games, and then Saunders got sacked quite early onto that season, and it all just started going downhill from there, to be honest. It just seemed like every manager we brought in wasn't getting the financial backing from the ownership. That season, we just about managed to stay up in League One. I think we finished like 18th or something like that. Then the following season, under Danny Wilson and then Gary Caldwell, it all just started going wrong, and we just couldn't seem to buy a win, to be honest with you. And I think there was a lot of bitterness towards the ownership, because obviously we'd gotten so close to promotion to the Championship, which for a club of Chesterfield size is just, it would have been incredible. And then obviously to then go to get relegated back to League Two, that was disappointing. But then the following season to get relegated out of the Football League, I mean, we'd not played below Football League level for 97 years, so it was just unfathomable that we'd dropped out of the league. I personally never thought I'd see us in non-league, but that's football, isn't it? Sometimes it does happen. But anyway, yeah, so for context, since we've been down in the National League, it's not been going all that great. We appointed Martin Allen as manager, who is a well-respected manager at this level of football. He obviously he's won it before with Barnet, and he also won League Two, I think, or at least got Gillingham promoted out of League Two prior to that. So he had some decent credentials. We brought him in, and I mean, the quality of football was just dreadful. Like, it was very much a long ball style of play. He signed Tom Denton probably to try and implement that, and he was one of our only half decent players, to be honest with you. So we've seen this horrible football, probably the worst football in the club's history. We just about managed to stay up after sacking Martin Allen and obviously bringing in John Sheridan, who just about managed to keep us up. Then the following season, Sheridan couldn't buy a win, sacked him. Pemberton comes in and just about manages to keep us up. Then Pemberton gets the job. In our first 8 games of the season, this season, we I think we won like 2 and lost 6 or something like that. Down in the relegation zone, all looked horrible. It's also worth mentioning that in the summer, last summer now, after 10 years of torment, Dave Allen did leave the club, and the Chesterfield SC Community Trust bought the club. Since then, there's been very much an upturn in the attitude of the fans towards the club, because there was, like I said, there was very much a bitterness towards the ownership, because they were very much blamed for the club's demise, obviously. But then the community trust come in. Obviously, Chesterfield fans, they care about the club, and despite the fact that things on the pitch weren't going so well early this season, the fans were still behind the trust. They then obviously took a bit of a gamble in bringing in James Rowe. He's a manager who Gloucester City was his first full-time managerial role. Before that, I think he'd been assistant manager at Aldershot when they reached the playoffs in the National League. So he had some credentials at National League level, and obviously he was doing really well with Gloucester City. They were top of the National League North when he left to come to Chesterfield. And since then, there's been an incredible upturn in form, and it is, in my opinion, largely down to the style of play that Rowe's implemented. Like I said earlier on, he's implemented a high pressing game, and it's very exciting to watch. We're pushing players back into their own half, they're struggling to play it out from the back, and we're winning the ball back a lot in there off the pitch. And he's also signed 13 players to date. There'll probably be another 10 by next week at the rate that he's signing them. And they've all had a massive impact as well. So, yeah, to sum up, it's been a very, very, very tumultuous last 5 years for Chesterfield. But James Rowe is been given the backing by the new ownership, and the style of play and players that he's implemented into the side has just made the absolute world of difference. So yeah, to answer your question, because I know I've been rambling a lot there. I do think that promotion to League Two is a possibility. I think the National League this season is a very, very tight division. I think probably teams all the way down from about, I don't know, let's say 4th to 18th believe they can get the playoffs at this point, because I think there's only about 6 points in it. It just shows you how crazy it is this season. But I think with the form that we've been in lately and the football that we're now playing, I think it's hard to look past us for getting into the playoffs, to be fair. So yeah, I think we can definitely get playoffs at least. But then obviously they're always a lottery, aren't they? You never know what's going to happen at that point.
You mentioned sort of players being signed. Obviously, the elephant in the room, if you like, is obviously signing quite a lot of Gloucester's players. Again, is that out of those guys then? I think I sort of know what you're going to say, but out of those guys, who do you think sort of been the best player so far?
So the obvious person to say would be Kwasi Sensei, wouldn't it? He's been in red hot scoring form since he joined. I don't have the exact stats on goals scored in front of me, but I think he's pretty much our top scorer in the league now. But I mean, I can't discount the impact of Carline either. He's been absolutely fantastic. Like I said earlier, we had Jordan Cropper at right back from Burnley, and I think the fact that Rowe favoured Carline over Cropper says it all about him, because Cropper was a fantastic right back, don't get me wrong, but Carline, he just seems to be that calm, composed player who's going to give you a 7 or 8 out of 10 every week. He's always consistent in his passing. He puts in a good tackle. He gets up and down the pitch quickly. He's everything you want in a fullback, pretty much. So I think Asante is the obvious choice, but also I'd say Carline is probably a bit of an unsung hero.
And as part of just players in general, obviously he's brought quite a lot in. Out of those guys, then, would you say any of us who you think have been sort of the stars of the new guys coming in?
Yeah, so there's a lot of options, to be fair, because I think they've all been fantastic. Not a single one of them I'd say have been bad since they've come in. But I think that the main thing that I've got to point out is probably the massive improvement in midfield. We didn't really have any kind of control in midfield beforehand. Obviously, Curtis Weston is a player who has been probably a mainstay in our midfield for the last 3 years, but he can't do it all on his own. And I think that's been quite clear. We've just not been controlling it. But we brought in Jack McCourt from the higher level, and Tom Whelan was one that we signed off of Weymouth, I believe. And they've both been absolutely phenomenal. They're just the kind of midfielders who are composed. You know, they'll play the ball around for fun. They're not afraid to run forward with it. They'll create things. They drive forwards, and you need that. Any successful football team needs it. At the end of the day, games are won and lost in midfield, I would argue. So I'd say that's probably the key thing. The fact that we've just got that much more composure. I mean, all across the side, but especially in midfield now.
Of players who were already there, you sort of spoke about players who were in favour before and out of favour. Have there been any players who perhaps were falling out of favour, not really playing that well? He's come in and sort of revitalised them in a way, sort of the opposite.
Yeah, I think the biggest example of that's probably Hayden Hollis. He wasn't featuring at all in the side, and to be honest, I was definitely guilty of slagging him off a little bit when he did play, probably like last season, because he put in a few dodgy performances. I mean, there was one defeat against Hartlepool where we lost 5-1, and he got absolutely rinsed for one of their goals, and that was sort of like the final straw with him for me at that point. But to be honest, since he's come back into the side, he's been put in the centre of a defensive three, if you like, and he's just been absolutely fantastic. He's vocal, he marshals the defence, he wins tackles, he wins headers. And I mean, as we've seen on the graphs a minute ago, he actually has a surprisingly high passes completed rate as well. So I don't know, he's like a man possessed, honestly. It's completely changed since he's come in, and I think it probably needed a manager like James Rowe to come in and get the best out of him. And I think that's probably the key takeaway, is that a lot of the players have said that James Rowe is the kind of manager who will get the best out of you. You know, he's a great man to work under, and he knows how to motivate and inspire players, and I think that's absolutely vital. Because I mean, the National League is a long old slog. You need a big squad, and you need to be able to rely on even your fringe players coming off the bench. But I think the fact that he's managed to get such an improvement out of Hayden Hollis That it just speaks volumes about the kind of manager that he is.
Yeah, and to sort of wrap this up then, providing obviously that we are allowed to finish the season, and that again, like I said, we sort of said this with the Alex Whitmore podcast, which we're going to shout out in a minute. Plug. This could be outdated. We're going to upload this hopefully in a day, maybe 2 days. This could be outdated. Any news could drop at any moment. Who knows what's going to happen? But providing obviously that the season can finish in some kind of way, there could be some kind of finish. This season for Chesterfield. You sort of said, do you think he might be the guy to take to Football League? Do you think that could be this season, or do you think the bad form at the start of the season will cost you at the end?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, you could essentially say we gave teams an 8-game head start this season, and we're 6 points off the playoffs. So I think that shows you a lot about the improvement that's happened since Rowe's come in. I don't know if we will make it this season, just simply because of the sheer amount of teams that are within a few points of the playoffs. So it's anybody's guess who will get there in the end. But I think the way that we're playing now and the players that we're signing, I think in the long term we will definitely have a crack at promotion with this side, because you can just tell that they are a quality outfit at National League level. So I think if not this season, we should definitely be pushing for at least the playoffs next year. But I think there's still a lot of games to play this year, so anything can happen.
And to sort of finish that, would you say generally, is one of them where you think that you said you don't think it's going to happen this season, but you're going to get sort of close? Do you think it's something where that you're going to get so close that you can sort of say, oh, this is how close we got, this is a sign we've got, you stay here, you keep, and you can sign a few more players, that's going to obviously be building something and going into next season, rather than sometimes you see when these take to get so close to the playoff, and then the whole team gets broken up and pulled away and split up.
I mean, I think there's a unity at Chesterfield now that we've not seen in about probably 5 or 10 years. I think that the ownership, the manager, the players, and the fans are all pulling in the same direction, and I think that is very important at any football club. And I think that synergy and like that feel-good factor that's currently at the club, combined with the fact that, without wanting to blow our own trumpet too much, we are a big club at National League level, probably one of the biggest teams in the league. I think that any player who moves on is probably making a mistake, to be honest with you, because I think that this club with this manager and this ownership, in my opinion, is going places.
Yeah, and so it sounds like you rate him, you think it's quite good, he's building something quite good, and hopefully maybe what could happen this season. We'll get you back on and have a chat about your point of view, obviously as a fan and watching even not at the games, but just doing your podcast and watching online and stuff like that, of what you see from the team. And hey, listen, maybe you get promoted, who knows what could happen.
Well, that's it. Yeah, fingers crossed. But we can all dream, can't we?
And before we go, we just want to give shout out to 2 things. Obviously, most people I think will probably be coming from you, so maybe it's a bit pointless, but I think we might get some of the guys who aren't too familiar. SpireitesWrite podcast, or at SpireitesWrite on Twitter. We'll leave all the links in the description to go and have a watch of of what they do and everything. I think it's on. Was it? I forgot. Is it Spotify you're on? Is that the one? I'm on a tower show with all these different streaming services. There's about 20 of them now, isn't there?
Yeah. It's getting crazy, isn't it, mate? Yeah. So we're on Spotify and we're also on SoundCloud. But if you go on our Facebook page or our Twitter page or Instagram, you'll find the link to one of our podcasts on there, and then you can access all of them there. I think we've got about 45 episodes now, so there's plenty for you to get through if you're a Chesterfield fan.
Yeah, and also shout out, we're going to give a shout to one of our podcasts that we did, the last one we did with Alex Whitmore, obviously formerly of Chesterfield for 6 months during that League 2 relegation season.
Thanks for reminding me.
It didn't do quite as well to be honest, as we thought it would done. But that's just how it happens, really. I think sometimes just luck of whoever shares it, really. I think sometimes it just does well and then it goes on and does quite well. So be sure, even if you're not a Chesterfield fan, go and have a listen, because we did have quite a long chat about stuff to do with, obviously he's in National League North now, but all the stuff going on with how that season's going to end, or whether it will end or how it will end, and quite a long chat about that, and also part of his career in general, and working under different managers, being at Bury, being at Grimsby, and all that. So be sure to go and have a watch of them. Just want to say thanks for you to, like I said, for coming on and taking time out, having a chat and for this series. little series we've got. I haven't got a name yet, but we'll keep going with these. And
well, cheers for having me. Appreciate you coming on. Yeah, thanks.
like I said, all links will be in the description for that to go and have a link and have a watch of that. But yeah, thanks for watching, and we'll see you in another one of these episodes.